performance marketing has built an analytical rigor into marketing that I think has been tremendously helpful.
Okay, welcome back to the Marketing Playbook, presented by Attentive and Power Digital. Here you'll take away 3 game-winning marketing plays every episode to take back to your team. I'm your host, Mark Friedman, and my career has been focused on direct-to-consumer marketing, direct mail, physical retail, and digital commerce. This is episode number 132, and my guest is Andy Judd. Andy has had a long career in CPG brands, from his time at Campbell Company through stints at Yasso, among others, and most recently at Poppi. I've not had many people on the show who are CPG focused, and Andy certainly brings that experience to the conversation. He offered some great thoughts on mentorship, crafting a career that allowed him to see not only different verticals, but also companies at very different stages of their maturity. We spoke a bit about how AI and it's being used now and the differences of marketing for a household name versus the up-and-comers. I hope that you enjoy the show. Before we get started, a quick thank you as always to Max Brandstetter of the Wild Business Growth Podcast for producing this episode. You can reach him at max@maxpodcasting.com to help bring your podcast to life. Let's open the playbook. Ready, break. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Marketing Playbook podcast. Today, I'm joined by Andy Judd. Andy is an experienced commercial and marketing executive leader whose mission is to champion today's rising leaders to become tomorrow's CMOs. He built a successful 20-year career by focusing on building exceptional teams and go-to-market models that build strong brands and businesses. With great experiences in the food and beverage space, Andy has led teams across brand marketing, insights, and creative services from large strategic CPG enterprises to emerging high-growth brands. Most recently, under his leadership, Poppi exploded, becoming culture's favorite soda with triple-digit sales growth and doubling brand awareness year over year, ultimately leading to the successful acquisition by PepsiCo in May of this year. Previously, Andy served as Chief Commercial Officer at Laird Superfood, where he helped lead the transformation of the brand, and CMO of Yasso, a high-growth novelty ice cream company, where he helped scale the brand to be a leader in frozen snacking. Andy's also worked with brands that have reset protein snacking with One Brands, which exited to Hershey, drove the early growth in categories like plant-based foods and gluten-free at the portfolio at Boulder Brands, which exited to Conagra, and he started his career at the Campbell Company. Andy, welcome to the show.
Awesome, Mark. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to a good discussion today.
So that background is a who's who in CPG. We're going to get into that in a bit, and we're going to also talk about your first story. But one of the things that stood out in your bio that I don't often see is one of the first sentences that you had. That your mission is to champion today's rising leaders to become tomorrow's CMOs. How did that become a mission?
I think one, I've always loved the prospect of coaching and mentorship. I've had incredible mentors pour into me. I would not be having this conversation about some of my experiences without the recognition of some of those great individuals and leaders that I had a chance to work with. And don't need to name names, but I could show you a litany of really successful people that I've done that. And so to me, as that was poured in, I wanted to pay that forward to people. And so I think the match of one, always having a constant learning agenda, which I'm sure we'll talk about it at some point throughout the day today, and sharing that and going forward was always a piece of that. And I think early in my career, I also recognized, like, people recognize the brands and they see the growth, but the individuals that you work with, like, they see past a lot of that, and it's really about, like, how did they involve and what value did they get personally in a work environment. And so to me, it was always about, I wanted to do right by anyone that I came in contact with directly, the people that I worked with, the people that worked for me, and how can I be the best leader to them. And if I did that, everything always worked out in the end. So rather than always just focusing on the revenue, focusing on the brand growth, like, if I could focus on the people, then those other things would inherently happen. And I think there's a decent enough track record here to show it paid off.
We like to get the guests' first story, where you grew up, and how perhaps your upbringing might have led to the career that you have had.
I'll say two pieces on the, that relate to the career. One, I'm as much, I guess, of a child of this industry to some degree. My father had a long running executive career on the distribution side of our industry, with a number of different companies, and so every weekend before we went to a sports field or whatever, it was like, hey, there's a new store opening, and let's go look at produce merchandising. So there was an osmosis that definitely took place. Y'all stopped short of a family business, but definitely a perspective there, for sure, that then is like, I'm always evaluating, and doing those things, as many children of any parent do, and so that was part of it. The second one is like, in his growth of his career, we moved a decent amount as a kid, and because of that, it naturally trained an evaluation process of environment, of culture, of people's behaviors, how they interact with things, why they do certain things. I was always in constant observation of that. And I think as fell into the brand, so a little bit of luck side of things, like that match of, all right, I've got some historical perspective here and understanding of the total ecosystem, from route to market, to go to market, as well as I've really studied people because of moves along my life as a kid.
Interesting. I think I mentioned this to you. This is show 132 for me. I've been doing this 5 years. And, one of the things that was interesting to me about your background is I've tended to have retailers, people on the provider side of retail. I haven't had a lot of folks that are CPG focused. And so that's interesting to me just as a consumer. And I think to the listeners, I tend to have people that are performance marketers. And while I imagine, you can't get to where you have become without having performance, but being a brand marketer and a brand manager is very different than spending a dollar knowing that you're going to get three back in return as a performance marketer. So talk a little bit about being a brand manager.
I was very fortunate early in my career to start at a great enterprise in the Campbell Company and be poured into and trained around brand position and brand value and equity and long term sustainable health, of a brand and ultimately an enterprise. And so, starting with that baseline and kind of like consumer centricity, then as my career progressed, performance marketing wasn't even a thing when my career began. I won't date myself terribly, but my go-to line is always like, Zuckerberg was in junior high when I started my career. And so the model evolved and performance marketing came along. And so I was fortunate enough to see the combination of those two things, and the benefits of them. How do you build a brand, but how do you understand the behavior that's happening in performance marketing? Performance marketing is ultimately about conversion and driving behavioral change. So is consumer marketing. It's just coming at it from a different vantage point. And so I think some of the rationale that I've felt success for is because I've been able to see both sides of that and can appreciate both sides, as well as can appreciate the flaws of both sides of that, whether that's talking a bit in a vacuum, sometimes in a brand sense, and using a lot of marketing ease, or understanding a flawed methodology of attribution, from the last click that's perhaps on the performance side, and being able to consider the benefits of those while understanding the context of them, I think has led to ultimately successfully building marketing models that can harness both powers.
You had a nice run, 6 years at Campbell, and you had a progression of roles, and then you decided to leave there, and you went to a company called Dean Foods, category director. Talk a little bit about how do you leave that first foundational, formational gig and take something new?
Leaving somewhere, anywhere that you pour into is always hard, and I would like to tell you that it was perfectly planned. And I do think in hindsight, I'm able to see the moves differently, of this kind of, both there's a geographical reality of east to west there's a traditional food to emerging. There is, I would say core convenient value foods to high growth, emerging natural and organic foods. In the changing landscape of the American diet, like there's a lot of like macro things that came along with that, and I think it all started, at Campbell's. I was working on a brand at the time. I still recall it, the analysis, and we were talking about this space called all other brands. And it was a bunch of tiny little brands that on the individual level weren't very large, but on the aggregate, contributed to about 10% share and were growing, a share point a year in a fairly, multi-billion dollar category. And so there was also this piece like, wait, something is happening here and a fundamental shift about how consumers think about brands. Simultaneous to that timeline, to back to the aforementioned social media rise, I had just completed my first Facebook program at that point, and saw something was new, and knew it was going to change the landscape, and felt that the historical perspectives of what some of the larger companies do like weren't going to move quick enough to meet that perspective. And so for me, it was about really expanding my horizons. It was about recognizing that both personally I was going through a kind of like nutritional or health and wellness awakening, wanting to move where my personal beliefs more matched my professional beliefs. My family was growing, geographic. So there was a lot of variables underneath that. But if I look back to the shifts, it was from large CPG to emerging brands, from traditional brands to higher oriented health and wellness brands over time that aligns more with my personal belief structures.
That's an interesting, sometimes, people have very prescriptive perspective on how they want their career to develop. They look at this box and they say, there's 8 pieces of my career that I need to have. I've had number one. I now need to move to number 2 and 3 and so on. Doesn't sound like it was that prescriptive. You said it kind of worked out for you.
If I were to play back the tape of Andy at that moment, when in 2010, when I left the Campbell company, like I was like dead set. I was like, I want to be a VP GM or maybe even a publicly traded CEO, one day. And I think all of us that are conscious observers of the world around us, like the closer you get in proximity to some of those things, you're like, wait, now I understand that more. Maybe that's not what I want. I also had a good mentor early, and that I would have considered that early in my career. That was like, get a range, right? Like go see a range of businesses, see stable businesses, turnaround business, high growth businesses, like see different categories. And so early in my career, I was hungry for experiences that then could help me translate into faster action, faster analytical understanding, and comprehension of a market and a brand and a position and where I could take it. And I think that also was part of that in this moment in my career.
Today's episode is brought to you by Power Digital, the growth partner for brands that refuse to settle. At the intersection of marketing, consulting, and data intelligence, Power Digital is where brands go to ignite revenue and scale fast. Their proprietary technology, Nova, transforms first-party data into clear, actionable insights, fueling smarter strategies, better investment decisions, and measurable growth. Power Digital's team of data scientists, creatives, and growth strategists challenge outdated marketing playbooks, delivering results that matter. If you're ready for an agency to turn your data into a competitive advantage, visit powerdigitalmarketing.com. You talk about progression. So, there was a period, a lot of dairy involved in the career. So a few years in an ice cream company. Is Saputo, is that the right?
Yeah. So Dean Foods was a company that had kind of like 3 businesses underneath of it. One was the Dean Foods, which is regional dairy business. Another was a business called Morningstar, which was largely an away from home, longer shelf life business, and then White Wave, which we'll get to in a second. And the maximization of the value of that industry was ultimately split up. And Dean Foods continued to do great businesses, the regional dairy programs, the Morningstar business, which was where I was working on some great culinary programs with fantastic fast food and QSR partners like McDonald's, building things like McCafe and shake programs for Five Guys, et cetera. I worked in that. That was sold to Saputo, and so there's also a storyline of acquisitions and M&As that also drive our industry underneath that. And so I went to work with Saputo for a period of time through that transition. It's a great Canadian dairy conglomerate, really savvy operators. Like the my interpretation was like, these are the guys that actually cry over spilled milk, so to speak. They're very savvy, very sharp folks. And then White Wave, which was spun off into its own company, and eventually I took off to that based on the connection points. So it's kind of like, yeah, there was this period of dairy that sits in my career for sure, and I came back to it with Yasso later in my career. I love ice cream. I think maybe that's the short of it, is I love ice cream.
That's okay. That's everybody likes
Yeah,
ice cream.
yeah, in moderation.
I mentioned my wife's a Yasso fan. So how did you get there? And talk for those that may not know that brand.
So Yasso is a frozen novelty and snacking, primarily based in Greek yogurt, and was founded by two childhood friends, Drew Harrington and Amanda Klein. They are fantastic founders to work with, and built this just incredibly tasting product that was 100 calories per bar. Ton of fun behind the brand. The brand position we ultimately went into was adult birthday party. And so this was a reinvention of healthy or portion controlled ice cream, which to their credit, they made incredible products. And I think that to me was always like part of my journey of selection of what brands I wanted to work with on emerging brands. Like, products got to be lights out, period, end of story. Like, because in order to implement fast growth, I never wanted to convince consumers to buy again. I only wanted to convince consumers to buy the first time, and then the product would have to do the work from there. And so Yasso, started in the Northeast primarily. I came in at a point where it was rapidly expanding on distribution, rapidly expanding on a household acquisition level, but it needed an ethos, it needed a brand to get behind it. And we had a lot of fun doing that adult birthday party, right? Which is like, who doesn't want to go to a birthday party? But we're adults, so maybe just 100 calories for this birthday party, and maybe Greek yogurt because it's a little better for me and less sugar than some of my other choices. So it's adults, but it's a lot of fun doing it. It's a great brand, and ultimately was acquired by Unilever.
So you mentioned earlier the sale of companies. I've worked in companies before where we got sold. Sometimes I was part of the sale team, and sometimes I just was a cog in the wheel, and we got sold. But you've been part of companies that have been sold. How does it feel as the employee of a business that you've worked really, really hard to help grow, and then you come to find maybe you were in the know, maybe you weren't, that it's going to be sold and changes are coming?
Yeah, I mean, like there were definitely times where I didn't know, early in my career. And then there were more later in my career, in the second half of my career, where I was much more in the know, and helping in that corporate development cycle, for sure. I think it's hard for sure. It's hard on people because it creates a level of uncertainty that happens for all. And like, back to the opening commentary around who I am as a leader. I'm a big culture first leader, and so for me, watching like any team kind of like go through that moment is hard, right? And I empathize greatly with that change that happens. However, sometimes those are necessary, for not just a financial outcome, but for the next life of the business, right? We're talking Yasso here, to not be a part of one of the largest ice cream companies in the globe, with other brands in their portfolio like Magnum and Ben and Jerry's. Like, that was a right approach that gave scale at the retailers, that helps to move it forward, to gain more shelf space or better supply chain efficiencies that enable the margin structure to improve to reinvest in the brand. Like there's real things that happen in that scaling process that make a lot of sense. And can also create a ton of new opportunity for employees, depending on what the scenarios are. When you're operating with one brand, you're not rotating into other brands and getting those experiences that I spoke that helps me early in my career. And so sometimes that door can also open up for employees. But yeah, it's hard, I think, to go through that. There's a natural trough that typically happens after any acquisition period, both on a kind of employee basis, but also on a business basis, to get through that. But if you look at the outcome of what happens over time, most of those are pretty successful and help those brands get to the next level that perhaps the current team isn't the right team for in a lot of cases. So I hope that gives you some context to it. Sometimes like it's your choice and sometimes it's not.
You've been in companies that have been, let's call them large and well established, and almost everybody knows them, like the Campbell Company. And then you've been in other businesses that were early in their maturity cycle, let's say like Yasso, perhaps like Poppi. What's the difference for you as the marketer in marketing a brand that's well known versus something that is not so well known?
Yeah, to me, like there's, I guess, a couple of components to that. One is the marketing mix or marketing model or go to market, whatever language we want to use that articulates how to market is in a constant evolution. And that evolutionary state has had dramatic impact on, I would say, a significant portion of the share of how we market brands over my tenure. Whether you recognize that in the digital revolution, whether you recognize it in the social component, influencer marketing, digital commerce, now AI. There's a number of things that have like shaken how we market to its core. And I mentioned this earlier, but like I recognized that early in my career, and it started a kind of internalization of like I have to keep evolving myself, and I have to keep evolving my understanding of the marketplace. Because of that, I would say that some of these emerging brands, they're starting at a different place, right? They're not starting with a bunch of historical context of this is how we did things, or this like we have to internalize a big shift because the shift come fast. It's not like, oh, all of a sudden it's, oh, look, it's coming and we got to make, it's like, no, oh, and here we go. And like all of a sudden, Meta's got a ton of my money, right? So like those things happen really quickly, and being able to pivot through those changes, like COVID, and I'm gonna say marketing model, like even contextual change, like COVID fundamentally flipped up the marketing cycle. So like those moments happen, and I've come to find that emerging and scaling brands have a much easier time adapting. Now, with that said, they don't have the resource pool that perhaps a lot of these larger businesses do that allow them to sometimes work through those transition points, by nature of volumetrically doing things, differently. And so I would say both have been helpful. I have tended over the latter part of my career to really enjoy the creation process of a brand, both the brand itself and the go to market, building a team, up over time. I had the great fortune to see the Poppy team almost triple in humans, the number of people, the teammates. And so that's, has a real impact on, kind of my enjoyment process. But I think it's the creation process, it's the building, it's the recognizing the change and having a small team that nimbly can adapt to learnings that I really enjoy.
Imagine getting a message from your favorite brand that feels like it was created just for you. That's the kind of personalized experience Attentive helps retailers create, especially during the biggest shopping season of the year. With Black Friday and Cyber Monday around the corner, retailers need to reliably connect with their customers, not just during the holiday rush, but all year long. Attentive's SMS and email marketing platform turns customer data into real conversations by capturing what matters most to each subscriber, then helping you reach them with the right message at exactly the right moment. No generic blasts, just personalized experiences that make customers feel truly understood. The result? Stronger connections that drive real results during Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and beyond. Visit attentive.com to see what your customer data can do. So you mentioned Poppy. Tell us about that business, where you got involved in its life cycle, and then talk a little bit about your time there and how it exited.
Poppy is, a prebiotic soda that kind of, burst onto the scene over the last couple of years. Great product, founded by a married couple, Stephen and Allison Ellsworth, invested by, Cabo Venture Partners, a great private equity firm whom I've partnered with in the past. They were also the private equity firm behind One Brands and next to Hershey's. So there was definitely some known entities there and great success in the past. I came into Poppy, kind of in that emerging to scaling phase, which is typically the last couple of roles I've had have been in that. That's the place that I feel like I can create the most value. I enjoy it a ton, and what that looks like is there's a great proof of concept behind the brand, right? So the product's there, the brand is the brand ethos is kind of in there. Maybe it hasn't been codified or like perfectly enhanced. Like Yas was a great example where it's like it was there, but it was like adult birthday party. Okay, now we got it. Let's and rolling. Or like, we had culture favorites. So okay, great, but like what does that look like in execution to all those things? And so you're working in, I would say, early stages of awareness, low levels of household penetration, but you've got a good definition of, I would say a beachhead to operate from. So in Poppy's case, it was the number one soda brand on Amazon, and that was up, done early. And I'm not even like, oh, we're like the number one share. No, we were like three times the size of Coke on the platform. And so you had this really nice digital system. You had a great TikTok platform. The founder, the brand was launched in 2020 during COVID. And so the founder was like, what is this thing? And she kind of ran with TikTok. And so you had some really beautiful pieces and some good executions, but it wasn't a holistic ecosystem. Digital commerce was being operated and media was being operated independently. Creative was kind of over here. It was like it needed a kind of cohesive way to run the totality of the marketing ecosystem in order to be ready for the distribution growth that was beginning. And when those pieces all came together, and thanks to the belief structure of the private equity partner to invest at critical moments, we were able to really take that thing from, I think I came in around 11% awareness, and I left around 45%. In just a couple of years, we went from 8% household penetration to 20% household penetration in that time. I mean, we were just doubling and doubling and doubling every month. And like I said, the people tripled during that time frame. We built an incredible college program that was a reimagining of field marketing and the digital way. So there was a lot of really incredible things that ultimately led to the acquisition by PepsiCo. One of the largest beverage companies in the world, and has just incredible promise ahead for what it can do in the PepsiCo system.
You talk a little bit about performance and measurement. You talked about brand awareness and household penetration. What other measurements, are you looking at to be able to evaluate whether you're doing a good job or not?
I mean, this is where, the performance side, I do think has helped us. And I say that in a broad sense. Performance marketing has built an analytical rigor into marketing that I think has been tremendously helpful. Where I think performance marketing sometimes struggles is like it's so ROAS oriented. It's so, connected to that it sometimes misses the long range, broad sustainability of creating a brand goes. And so for us, we measured both. And so underneath the Poppy ecosystem was also a very heavy analytical system and MarTech system to help us measure those things so that we could make rapid bets along the way. We had three different MMM models plus a media attribution model. We had a very sophisticated organic and earned media measurement model and tool that we also created a proprietary way to think about earned media as a, in relation to cost structure versus paid media. We had a heavy commerce business, as I mentioned. We're the number one brand on Amazon, so we had a significant amount of digital commerce evaluation. And then we had our consumption pool. We had a way to evaluate equity, inclusive of awareness. We were looking at awareness, on a monthly, like really tight windows, how that connected into the media that we were running in partnership with our media partner. So there was a lot of analytical rigor that sat underneath so that we could evaluate decisions that we were making along the road. And I think that's part of it. I think some of the challenge in today's market landscape is, like I say, like I've never written a plan on January 1st that looks the same on December 31st. In 20 years of doing this, not one time could I pull up an AOP presentation from January and be like, here's exactly what we did. Like it just doesn't happen that way. External forces alone, but also the learnings. And I think that's where it's like we wrote a plan every month and redid the business and trained a culture of quick adaptability, not just because of what was happening culturally in the marketplace, which is part of the ethos of marketing, but also analytically what was happening in performance and how do we tie those two things together. And I think it ultimately sparks, once people like grabbed that as the foundation and the baseline, then it wasn't like, oh, we're shifting things and it's uncomfortable, it's volatile, to I'm embracing this and this is fun because I get a chance to see what I did or see what's happening in the marketplace and run to that thing. And I think that to me is a lot of the cultural benefits and kind of values of that organization, that you don't see. You see the rapid rise, you don't see that like kind of duck on the water that's happening underneath it. And a lot of it is because we did the right thing to build the right analytical approach to what we were doing.
AI. How did AI play in any of the roles that you had? And I'm going to guess if it did, it was in more recent roles because it's still pretty new for marketers.
First off, like what is AI, right? And I think I don't say that in jest, but I think that predictive behavioral components of marketing have been happening for some time. We're now characterizing it more as AI, but the CRM side of marketing has had a lot of auto campaign work, and how we place media in a digital environment has had a lot of those components already. Maybe not generative AI, but definitely the utilization of predictive AI in order to get there. And I think for me, we were using a lot more predictive. We had not gotten into a deep level of generative AI. We're starting to see it in the CX side of things, that could help us get through case logs, et cetera. But a lot of the businesses that I've worked on, we hadn't quite gotten there. We were starting to use it creatively to help to expedite the creative cycle, right? But not necessarily to finish the creative product. And I think it was helping the team to, I would say, put better efficiency in the work, but not necessarily replacement of the work. And I think that's now starting to happen in a bigger way.
Well, some great brands that you've been part of. What's next for Andy Judd?
Yeah, so right now, Andy Judd took a nice has taken a nice summer off to be with my family. Going through some of these experiences, it takes a lot, right? And it takes dedication, and you have to be willing to roll up the sleeves and work really hard. And as much as Poppy looks like it just popped onto the scene out of nowhere, you had a lot of people working really hard, great, intelligent people working really hard. And so took a break, and I'm continuing to invest. I just enrolled to get a new master's degree, a master's of divinity, and kind of continue to learn about the totality of the world that I live in. So I'm doing that and evaluating some different opportunities. I'm still connected to some brands and helping them out because I'm passionate about the health and wellness space, and doing that right now. And then we'll see what comes next on a larger scale.
Good stuff. Good luck with the Masters. That's awesome.
Thank you.
So we're down to the end of the show. There's a 2-minute drill here. 7 questions, One word answer. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. A brand that you admire or that inspires you.
DoorDash.
Interesting. Favorite app on your phone.
Yeah, I'm old school here. ESPN.
Last website.
Go Birds. Sorry, just had to make sure I put that out there.
Okay. Last website other than Amazon that you shopped from.
Huckberry.
Something that you're not good at, but wish that you were.
I wish I was good at painting. I wish I could paint.
Walls or actually can't
No,
something on
like
a
painting, like
canvas?
canvas. Yes, like canvas. I can paint a wall. That part I
A,
got.
a charitable organization that you're passionate about.
Yeah, I'm passionate about your local church. There's a lot of stuff out there that, that church does for your community, to meet people where they are. So, not a big one, but like, don't forget about what your local church does in your community.
If you had one superpower, what would it be?
Ooh, this one, I went back and forth between flying, because why not? But ultimately, I landed with ESP. I would love to be able to read people's minds.
That's a dangerous one.
Yeah, I know. Because what comes with that is like implementing thoughts in other people's minds. But like, it's the reading.
Yeah, I've always been happy that some people couldn't read my mind. But
Yeah.
other than family, what's your most prized possession?
Yeah, I definitely I want to underscore emphasize other than family in case they listen to this, but probably my dogs after that.
Okay, Andy, where can people reach out to you on social media should they be interested?
Yeah, they can always connect to me on LinkedIn is the best place to do that. So feel free to reach out, and love learning from other people, and making connections.
Okay, great. Andy, this was great. It was nice to have met you. I really appreciate the time, and I wish you the best of luck in whatever you decide to do.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark, for having me.
That's it. Today's game ball goes to Andy Judd for coming on the Marketing Playbook. To me, today's three game winning marketing plays were as follows. Number one, how are you being mentored in your career, and how are you helping to mentor others? We've talked about this topic often on the show, mostly because it's so important, and everyone seems to have had multiple mentors throughout their careers. The key is what you do with the guidance that you've been given, and then what are you doing to pay it forward to help others? And number two, the part of the show where we follow people along their career journey is always interesting to me. I find that more and more people are being very prescriptive about what the 360 view is of the companies that they've worked for. So the message is have a plan, set the goal of where you would like to be, and then establish a roadmap that'll help you get there. And number three, companies get sold. It's just the way things work. If it's your company as the founder, it's never easy to give up your baby. But every company has a life cycle, and it needs different leadership and different tactics depending on where in the life cycle it is. What might have worked as the scrappy startup might not work when you're a more established company. Be open to change and embrace it. Thank you, Playbook marketers, for listening to another episode. If you want to check out more pages of the Marketing Playbook, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast spot and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Until next time, the devil is in the details.